good friend of the program and outstanding journalist who just yesterday was named State Sports Writer of the Year, Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News, tidesports.com. Cecil, first of all, congratulations. And I'm just hoping that your colleagues there at the Tuscaloosa News will shower you with a party that includes all the best from McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Domino's. We can only hope for that kind of spread, right? Right, Cecil?
I don't know if they can spring for that or not. So.
In all seriousness, congratulations, Cecil.
Some white bread and some Archibald sauce will be fine.
You know, I was about to say that. I think if Cecil could make his request for his champions dinner, and I'm guessing there'll be a championship ring presented as well, it would involve Archibald's, right? I mean, that would be the pick, I would think, for Cecil Hurt.
Got to support the local institutions.
Absolutely.
We have so many good ones, but Archibald's is right down the street. So.
There you go. And that was sort of our honor to you. We know you're a big Led Zeppelin fan. So the playlist theme for today is time. So we brought you in with a little good times, bad times from your guys there.
Absolutely, some Bonham. That's appropriate pick anyway for talking about Alabama in 2019.
You know, I mistakenly said yesterday that it had kind of been an O for week for Alabama athletics dating back to that national championship game loss to Clemson. But in going back, I do believe I have a correction to make. The Alabama men's diving and swim team on its senior day actually took down Florida State over the weekend. So we don't certainly want to overlook any of the sports there at UA. But talk about kind of this wide swing in emotions, and not only that, but news coming in the days immediately following that game in Santa Clara. You know, does this feel different to you, Cecil, or does this kind of feel like what we've experienced before with Nick Saban in Alabama?
Well, I'm trying to think back to 2 years ago, and I guess in some ways it's similar when Alabama doesn't win the championship and the sky is falling. And, you know, the truth, is, as always, is somewhere in between. I think they had a couple of guys that declared early for the draft that they'd like to have seen stick around for another year. Usually, the way you can tell that, the ones who are on the podium with Coach Saban, this year it was on a Friday, it's not always a Friday, but the ones on that Friday podium sort of have the seal of approval from the head coach. And the ones who weren't, he probably wondered if they couldn't have helped themselves with another year. So, a lot of rebuilding to do on defense. Plenty of talent on offense. They can find somebody to coordinate it, which I'm sure they will. It's tough. You know, Alabama fans are used to having things go their way more often than not. So some are more resilient than others when that doesn't happen.
Cecil, obviously a lot of buzz surrounding Steve Sarkisian and a potential return to Alabama on that offensive staff. That word came from ESPN on Saturday night. Once the initial shock value of it, I guess, wears off, especially and more so among the fan base than anything else, why would a return of Steve Sarkisian to Alabama, in your opinion, make sense?
Well, I think he's got a track record of going back to USC of putting some pretty strong offenses on the field. There's no way to judge his year at Alabama when he was not the offensive coordinator until the final 6 days of the season. That was just such a unusual set of circumstances that it's tough to say, well, he was good, he was bad, he was different. You know, they didn't win that national championship game, but the game close. A lot of people didn't like the third down conversion rate in that game, and you can analyze that as much as you want, but again, I think his long-term track record as a college coach, and I don't know that statistically his 2 years in Atlanta were really, terrible. Again, people have complaints. He didn't get the ball to Julio in the red zone enough, or Matt Ryan leveled off, or whatever they were. But I didn't, given the injuries they had, I didn't think that scoring points was really the problem for the Falcons this year. Now there are a lot of Falcons fans who would say differently, so I'm not going to slug it out with them. But I think that for one thing, anytime that this was true with Coach Bryant too. Anytime that anything goes wrong and people are reluctant to criticize the big guy, the coordinators really get it. They really take the brunt of it, and I think that there's some of that going on. So I think that's one of the things that's out there. I personally, I'm not qualified to judge the whole candidate pool without knowing who all the candidates are. But B, could certainly see that Steve Sarkisian is a legitimate candidate.
We talk so much about the offensive side of the ball, and that's really been the point of emphasis in terms of, you've got to replace Brent Key. It's what we know right now. You got to replace Brent Key as the offensive line coach. You got to replace Josh Gaddis as your wide receivers coach. Obviously, the coordinator situation. Not only that, Dan Enos was your standalone quarterback coach. So really, you're looking at potentially up to 4 spots on offense, at least that you're looking at turnover. But considering how the defense performed down the stretch of the season, especially from the SEC championship game through the college football playoff, can you envision a scenario where Saban stands pat on that side of the ball? And maybe not so much in terms of coaching changes, but in terms of how the operation works in general moving ahead to 2019, Cecil?
Yeah, I mean, I can. Can I envision a scenario? Yes. Can I envision a scenario where they make some changes? Yes. There's always evaluation going on. There's always. I think on that side of the ball, and this isn't being critical of anybody. I think that this time last year, when Jeremy had taken the Tennessee job late in the process, when it looked like Tennessee was going in a different direction, and Nick opted to promote from within, at least as far as Tosh is concerned, and then bring in Pete Golding. I don't know that all that has sifted out yet. I think that there was an expectation fairly late in the process that Jeremy would be back, and then Tennessee, as everybody remembers their search, decided late in their process that Jeremy would be their choice, and I think it's a good choice. But I think it sort of made it a transitional year for Alabama, and that there was always going to be that year, and then sort of see what shook out and evaluate after this season. So I think that was always going to be the case.
Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com on a Tuesday edition of Southern Fried Sports, presented by Carty and Lloyd, attorneys at law, and also Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. Hey, Cecil, we touched on the underclassmen earlier in the segment. You said it. Typically, that podium, that stage on Declaration Day kind of tells you the guys who have the stamp of Saban approval. Over the weekend, obviously, some announcements, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Savion Smith makes the move. Deontay Thompson makes the move. Mac Wilson makes the move. Were you surprised by any of those three? Maybe Deontay not as much, but what about Mac and Savion Smith?
Deontay played 4 years, would have had a 5th year of eligibility if he'd wanted it. But I wasn't surprised at that. Some guys, 4 years is what they want to do, and they think it's time to move on. I think he has a chance to be drafted. I don't know if he'll be. His early projections were really high. I don't know as a safety, and the way the year closed out. I'm not sure exactly how high he would be, but I was neither surprised nor would I really question Deontay's decision. Mac went really back and forth. Really went back and forth every time. So I think he was really leaning to coming back, and then he got down to the end, and you never know what somebody's personal situation dictates. So best of luck to him. I think another year of college would have helped Mac, but he's a guy that can be valuable on special teams, a guy that can be a good inside linebacker. I don't think it's a really deep group of. You get past Devin White, I don't think it's a really deep group of inside linebackers going into the draft this year. So maybe that will help him. Savion's situation, again, Savion. It's been tough for him to stick in a lot of situations, and that's not a criticism. It's just a fact. He's gone from IMG to LSU to Mississippi Gulf Coast to Alabama, and you have to have some talent to be able to go to those places. He just hadn't been able to stick, so maybe he felt like this was the time. I think he'll combine out pretty well. I don't know how the tape will be to him. I don't know if it'll be especially kind, but I think Savion will combine out pretty well and get a look. So, and this is, I guess, probably the fifth year in a row that Savion's made a move. So maybe he's just a rambling guy, as the Allman brothers would say.
Rambling man. There you go. Good insight, as always, from Cecil Hurt.